The prairie stretched in endless silence, a sea of dust and gold broken only by the wind's whisper through the grass. To the west, mountains stood like old sentinels, holding secrets of men who had long since vanished. And in that hush, on the far edge of a town that barely spoke his name, lived Elias Hart. He was 31, a man carved by solitude, handsome in the way sunlight falls on weathered stone, something strong yet worn, rich in ways measured by cattle and land, but hollow in all that mattered. He carried silence as though it were armor, each word unsaid pressed deep into his chest until it became part of his bones. No one in town truly knew him. They only guessed. Some whispered of a betrayal long ago, some of a shame that had cut too deep to heal. They saw his wealth and called him fortunate, yet the sight of his lone figure riding the hills each evening told a different truth. He ate his meals alone, he slept in a house where the boards creaked not from laughter or footsteps but only from the wind. To watch Elias from afar was to watch a man already halfway buried, still breathing yet long gone. And still, in that emptiness, there was a question waiting to be answered. He felt it in the stillness of dawn, when the mist clung to the earth and the world seemed to hold its breath. He felt it each time his hands paused in their work, reaching for something not there. What was he waiting for? He could not say. Only that something unseen tugged at him, and it made his solitude ache sharper than hunger. It was on one such evening, when the sky bruised with violet and gold, that she came. Her figure appeared first as a shadow walking the trail, small against the sweep of horizon. Then the shadow resolved into a woman, her dress marked by dust, her dark hair heavy with the day's weight, her steps slow but steady. She did not arrive with the noise of wagons or the arrogance of demand. She came as one who had walked too far, carrying silence in her hands as if it were all she owned. When she reached the worn wooden gate of his ranch, she lifted her chin. Her face was young, no more than 22, yet marked by something that made youth seem both fragile and old at once. Naomi Blackbird, that was the name she would give him later, though it arrived slow, like trust itself. Her eyes were the kind that saw without flinching, the kind that had known grief. She carried no man at her side, no kin trailing after her, and when she spoke, her voice was low, almost reluctant to disturb the air. "I've nowhere to go," she said. The words struck him with the weight of confession. Elias stood in the doorway, hands braced against the frame, staring at this stranger who looked both strong and broken, proud and desperate. He felt something stir that he had long trained himself to bury, recognition. For her loneliness was not unlike his own, though hers wore different scars. He could have turned her away. He nearly did. A man who had taught himself to survive in silence does not invite company easily, and the thought of townsfolk's whispers crawled already at the back of his mind. She was young, widowed, native and poor. The town would carve her with cruel words as quickly as it had carved him. To take her in would be to court the sting of judgment all over again. And yet, loneliness is a hunger deeper than pride. Elias opened the door wider. That night she slept by his fire, her back to the flames, her breathing even as though sleep was the only gift she still trusted. Elias lay awake in his own bed, listening to each small sound, the shift of fabric, the soft hum of her breathing, and felt the edges of his world press against hers. It unsettled him. It unsettled him more than the years of silence that had come before. By morning, Naomi moved as if she belonged. She did not ask what to do, she simply began. Her hands smoothed the chickens into calm, her fingers found the broken handle of a bucket and mended it with a strip of cloth. She was not a guest who waited to be served, but a woman who knew how to survive. Elias watched from the doorway, his coffee cooling in his hand, his chest tight with something he could not name. He tried not to speak. Words to him were like stones too heavy to lift. But Naomi hummed as she worked, a low tune, old and sorrowful, the kind that rises from memory more than choice. Elias found himself standing still just to hear it, though every note tugged at places in him that he had long closed off. He wanted to ask her what the song meant, whose voice had taught it to her, but he swallowed the question. Questions led to answers, and answers could not be unsaid. The days slipped into rhythm. Elias would leave bread on the table, and by dusk there would be stew simmering in the pot. He repaired the fence in silence, only to find a cluster of wildflowers set near his tools, placed with quiet care. They moved around one another like two rivers joining slowly, hesitant to flood, careful not to break the banks. No declarations, no sudden embraces, only gestures that softened the air. Still, there was the world beyond the ranch. In town, tongues wagged. They said the cowboy had taken in a widow out of pity, or worse, out of desire unfit for public eyes. They mocked Naomi's heritage, called her burden, called her shame. Elias heard the laughter at the general store, low and sharp, meant to cut. He clenched his fists, nearly turned away, nearly sank again into the silence that had always shielded him. But then Naomi walked past him, head high, shoulders straight, carrying the weight of every whisper without bending. In that moment Elias saw what he lacked: the courage to bear the world's cruelty without retreat. He realized then that what they shared was not only loneliness, but resilience born of rejection. It was a storm that broke them open. One night the skies tore themselves apart, thunder shattering the dark, rain falling in torrents that bent the trees. The ranch shook under the weight of it. Naomi rushed into the night to save the animals, and Elias, without thought, followed. They fought the wind together, ropes burning their hands, bodies pressed against the force of rain. When at last the barn was secured and the animals stilled, they stumbled back inside, drenched, hair plastered, lungs burning with exertion. It was a storm that broke them open. One night the skies tore themselves apart, thunder shattering the dark, rain falling in torrents that bent the trees. The ranch shook under the weight of it. Naomi rushed into the night to save the animals, and Elias, without thought, followed. They fought the wind together, ropes burning their hands, bodies pressed against the force of rain. When at last the barn was secured and the animals stilled, they stumbled back inside, drenched, hair plastered, lungs burning with exertion. The candlelight flickered on their wet clothes. Elias's hands shook, not from cold but from the nearness of her. Naomi sat by the fire, her dress clinging, her eyes reflecting the flames. He reached for her hands without thinking, caught them, held them steady. Neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer a wall but a bridge, and though no words passed, a vow formed in the heat of their joined hands. In the days after, the storm outside was replaced by another. The townsfolk grew bolder. At church they whispered loudly enough to be heard, demanded Elias turn her out. He felt their eyes on him, waiting for him to fold as he once had, to take his silence and let it swallow him again. But something inside him had shifted. He stood tall, voice steady, and for the first time in years he spoke so all could hear. "She stays." The words rang sharper than gunfire. The church went still. Naomi's eyes met his, glistening not with dependence but with recognition. She saw not a man saving her, but a man saving himself. That night Elias took a piece of silver, melted it down with his own hands, and shaped it into a plain ring. He placed it before her, not with grand speeches, but with the weight of action. Naomi took it in silence, her acceptance carrying more power than any vow spoken. Under the pale sprawl of stars, they stood side by side, no longer strangers bound by loneliness, but partners bound by choice. The world might still whisper, the town might still sneer, but neither of them walked alone any longer. And years later, when the prairie bloomed with flowers Naomi planted and laughter returned to the ranch's walls, Elias would remember the moment she first stood at his gate, dust on her dress, voice low as prayer. He would remember that loneliness had not been the end of his story, but the waiting ground for grace. So if you ever find yourself swallowed by silence, believing it the measure of your life, take heart. Sometimes the ache you carry is not the death of love, but its beginning. Sometimes the door you fear to open is the very one that will save you. And sometimes if you dare to hold on, someone will arrive at the edge of your horizon and whisper, "I've nowhere to go," and in choosing to let them in, you may find at last the place you've always been waiting